Son of a... I don't know any damn code. Yo, hello? Old habits die hard.
Do you ever just wonder? I do.
While I greatly enjoy my time with Deathloop, I can't help but feel that of all the Arkane titles, Deathloop is the one that misses the most in regards to execution on its premise. It takes numerous elements from Dishonored and Prey Mooncrash, mixes it with elements of Dark Souls and their unreleased title The Crossing, with its invasions, and time looping like Majora's Mask. This sounds great on paper, and when it blends together well, it's fantastic. However, it doesn't all quite come together like some of other Arkane's titles. It's not the 10 out of 10 masterpiece that gaming publications have been throwing at the game. But had it landed its execution better, it could have been up there with Dishonored and Prey. That said, it is both ambitious in what it goes for, and yet it plays it a bit safe by not committing to its ideas 100%. Its first few hours are quite rocky in trying to teach you how to play the game, but once it opens up, it starts to show what it's really made of. At the end of the day, I do recommend Deathloop, whether for now or for something that you would pick up later on a sale. To note, I played this on PC with a 1070 as my graphics card. My first session was a bit choppy, but there are some Steam guides I found that will help you fix up performance issues. The game has also received some updates here and there. As one commenter said in my stream I did for Deathloop, it's called the Void Engine, the engine that Deathloop runs on, because that's where your frames go. There will be spoilers later in the video, and I'll let you know when that's the case. So let's get to it.
For the last time, I can remember!
I don't know if you just give me a second.
Oh, you're not even trying.
We start off the game playing as Colt, with Juliana stabbing us, only for us to awaken on a beach on the island of Blackreef. Colt runs into a past version of himself and starts to remember the loops, and now it's up to us to break the loop. Same day keeps repeating itself over and over, but only Juliana and Colt on this island of Blackreef can remember that. With that, we get a pretty long tutorial that's quite hand-holding in trying to explain the game to us. Deathloop does not by any stretch of the imagination put its best foot forward. The number of criticisms I've seen the game get for the first stretch is justified. This even goes back to the marketing of the game, with all the trailers that we got up to its release trying to explain what Deathloop was. Yes, the game plays by a different set of rules, but the game doesn't give enough credit to the player to put everything together. Whether it was a publisher mandate, or Arkane wasn't confident in the player getting it, or a combination of the two, it's hard to say. As a result, it doesn't have that same intrigue that Prey did in its intro. While the looping aspect is interesting, it takes a while to get going due to the game explaining its rules as pop-ups. Lots and lots of pop-ups. I came across this clip of Northern Line describing modern day AAA games and tutorials that I feel really hits the mark.
And I'm not trying to be upset with it, okay? This is what I'm saying though about AAA games. Is they're like, hey, press WASD to move forward and move sideways. And you're like, I got that part. Then they're like, the temporal anomaly is something that you can access via your crafting menu. If you get 17 prismatic shards, you can craft a temporal anomaly trinket that allows you to interface with the Rift realm. And you're like, okay, that one I could have used like a little stepwise introduction to.
First impressions are key. I'm sure we've all heard of or played games where it takes, 5 to 10 hours for the game to really get good. Here, those first couple of hours are quite rocky and don't get the game off on the right foot for what's to come. Set in the 1960s, Deathloop has a recognizable style that's very much Arkane. The style that isn't seen in a ton of games. Another example of games with a similar time frame and style would be No One Lives Forever or Bioshock. It makes great use of color, but also feels at the same time that Deathloop could have leaned more into the setting in regards to design, especially the spy aesthetic. The soundtrack, on the other hand, is fantastic and leans far more into that 1960s spy feel than the presentation does.
Whatever.
As it's a time period and style that not a lot of games cover, it is fresh and distinctive. Let's get to the gameplay in regards to Deathloop. While I initially thought it was going to have constantly moving time like Majora's Mask, Deathloop takes place at 4 different time frames: morning, noon, afternoon, and evening, across 4 different areas. When you're in an area and time frame, time doesn't move forward, so it's not a case of waiting around will turn morning into noon. This is something I was bummed out by. I thought they were going to go this way initially before that was cleared up in one of the trailers. Our goal is to take out the Visionaries, this game's assassination targets, in one loop. Each area and time frame will have Visionaries at various points, and the further we get into the loops, the more we can find out about them in order to bring them together and take as many of them down at the same time. Dying 3 times in a loop will put us back at the beginning of the day. Of course, each area is full of interesting things to come across and do, from finding side quests, journal entries, interesting areas, which of course change up depending on the time of day. Some areas are only accessible at certain points. We'll also have enemies around, the Eternalists. They're cannon fodder. One of the main criticisms for Deathloop, and rightfully so, has been the AI. They're brain dead with a total lack of peripheral vision who take a long time to see you. You could also tag enemies, but that's a mod trend I'm not a huge fan of, so I didn't make use of it. Instead of bodies hanging around when they're killed, they'll disappear. There's no real variety to enemies beyond Eternalists with gun, or Eternalists with a machete. Another case of the game not putting its best foot forward, the more Visionaries that you kill during a loop, the more alert and better behaved will the Eternalists be. So while enemies will still be pretty dumb in how they'll just run at you, you will notice the difference in the challenges that you come across the more Visionaries that you kill off in a run. One thing that's noticeable upfront in Deathloop compared to other Arkane titles is that there is a fair amount less in regards to choice and interacting systems, especially when compared to Prey. The game does have a reason for that, and more on it shortly. That said, it's still leaps and bounds compared to other games. Instead of a wide arsenal, Colt has a machete and can hold up to 3 guns. We could swap them at any time, and we could pick up trinkets as well to upgrade them. Deathloop has a carryover system of carrying over your gear to the next loop. We could collect Residium to infuse our gear, and also sacrifice guns, slabs, and trinkets for Residium that we could use. It's a nice system to get you to think of what you want to carry over depending on how much Residium you have. However, later on in the game it becomes less of an issue as you'll pretty much be swimming in Residium. Of course, this Residium can be lost if you die. When you are killed, you need to go back to your body to pick it up. If you get killed off and the loop ends, anything that you didn't have infused over won't carry over to the next loop. However, we can infuse in between each time frame of the day, so while there is a possibility of losing some gear, it's not for the most part going to be detrimental. This fits well with what the game's going for. Even if Deathloop seems to over-explain it, it makes it seem more complicated than it needs to be. It didn't feel like it was thrown in there just because this somewhat similar style of crafting is popular in games. Guns do pack a lot of punch, and this is the best that an Arkane game has felt in regards to shooting. There is hacking in Deathloop, from turrets to sensors to nullified fields. Instead of coming up with a hacking minigame, it's just a simple aim at target and wait, which I can appreciate how it just went for that, especially after how lackluster the hacking minigame was in Prey. It's so nice to have the Dark Messiah kick back in. There's still few things in games that can derive as much satisfaction as kicking someone off a ledge. Plus, it's really satisfying kicking that crappy guitar playing Carl's Bay off the ledge. Then there are the slabs themselves, this game's supernatural abilities like in Dishonored. They're more or less all the same from Dishonored with nothing new. It's a bit disappointing, and there's not a whole lot of them. Don't get me wrong, they're still fun, but it'd been nice to see something a bit more. Shift is this game's equivalent to Blink. Aether allows us to turn visible, Nexus links enemies together like Domino in Dishonored 2, Havoc allows us to deal a lot more damage while taking less, and Carnesis allows us to pick up and toss enemies around. These need to be collected from a Visionary, and repeat loops will allow us to collect additional upgrades for each slab each time we take down a Visionary. These additional upgrades do make for some interesting things you could do. One fairly amusing one I found is with Shift, is swapping places with enemies. While it's a bit convoluted way to kill an enemy, you could jump off a ledge, turn, target your enemy, and swap places with them to watch them fall to their death. Carnesis is a lot of fun of just tossing enemies any which way you please.
Seekers!
Somebody cover me!
They believe busted!
So while these slabs work well in the context of Deathloop, since so much of its DNA is from Dishonored, it's unfortunate that the game greatly limits how many choices we have at one time. We can't remove the slab that allows us to die up to 3 times before the loop resets, so we only have 2 slots. And due to how useful it is, Shift just always feels like a given, so what you choose for otherwise feels quite limited. Sure, the more loops you go in, you can decide which one works best for what area you are in that time of day, but feels like Deathloop should have offered you another slab that you could use as well at the same time. As I mentioned, we do have a couple of tries on a level before the loop resets from dying, and one fairly bold design choice is that there is no save scumming. There were a few moments earlier on where by force of habit I was going for the F5 key, but I didn't really miss it. And this is one of those areas where I feel like Arkane still held a bit back on instead of fully committing to some of these design choices. While you can't quick save, it seems that Arkane decided to scale back on the game difficulty to not make things too punishing, instead relying on a dynamic-based difficulty system. Those can work, Resident Evil 4 being a great example, but here I find it takes away more instead of adding to the experience. Enemies pose very little threat at the beginning of loops, and it's not unless you're going for that one loop of eliminating all the visionaries that they really start to become an issue. I do wish there was a way that we could take the slab off for reprise so we have the ability to select another slab. With that, we would only have one life before our loop resets. Perhaps the game could have made some adjustments as a result, such as giving us more health. Now there is a reason that things like slab abilities, no save scumming, and other aspects are pulled back compared to other Arkane titles, and that's the addition of invasions. So to note about invasions, this is something that Arkane wanted to do over 15 years ago with The Crossing, a title that never saw the light of day. With that, the easiest comparison is Dark Souls, where a player will take control as Juliana. Juliana only has one life, but she also has access to the Masquerade slab that Colt does not. This form allows you to swap appearances with another Eternalist. As Colt, you don't have to kill her, you could find the antenna to hack and you could slip away. So here's the thing I've been wondering for the last little bit when playing Deathloop. It's obvious that the addition and emphasis of invasions required Arkane to scale back on other things, such as player freedom. Was that the right choice? Would they have been better off not having the experience in altogether? Well, when the mode works well, and lag isn't a major issue, some of my favorite moments from playing the game came from these invasions. That tension of being the invader or being invaded, trying to find where they are, and engaging combat can be exhilarating. That is, when it works well. There'd be some major lag issues. As of the time of writing this script, there's still a number of bounce issues when it comes to the encounters. When it comes to being the invader as Juliana, the game is favored to do so after spending a fair amount of time playing as Colt. The reason being is when you're sent to an area and time frame to invade, you'll have a much better idea of where the Colt that you're hunting is going to be. This is where the game incentivizes a stealth approach during an invasion as Colt. Enemies that detect Colt will pop up on Juliana's radar of where he was last spotted. Spotting Colt as Juliana and tagging Colt will get enemies to flock to him. And when it works well, it's a great experience. Being the invader really opens up the game and gets you to see it in a different way. Although I do have to admit, a few times when I invaded, I did feel a bit bad. I could tell they were fairly far along in the loop and I had to put an end to it. There was this one time at Freestad Rock where a Colt killed Fia, and while absorbing the residium from her, I snatched him away from the jaws of victory by assassinating him.
Same time tomorrow, Captain.
So was this something that was worth having in the long run in the game? While they have a mixed reception from the community, invasions in Dark Souls have played a role in why the game has been so beloved and influential for over a decade now. Arkane titles more or less have long shelf lives, even for the most part they've never been huge sellers, so whether a few months or years down the line is going to be taking forever to invade a game, we'll have to wait and see. It's still early of the release, so I'm guessing some balancing issues will be patched up, but as it currently stands, when lag's not a factor, it is a nice addition on something that they've wanted to have in a game for years. This is where I'm going to get into some light spoiler territory, but lighter compared to the section on plot in the world of Deathloop. Our main goal of Deathloop is to get rid of all these visionaries in one loop. Putting together the pieces of where the visionaries will be at the time of day and how you can dispose of them is a lot of fun to gather together. In regards to the journal system, Colt has a sharp memory because we're going to be given thorough information from all these notes and discoveries we make. He's updating his notes like the Nameless One updates his journal from Planescape Torment.
Updated my journal.
That said, I still took notes on paper for myself to try to piece everything together. I love when games really push you to do so. And while there is a lot to remember, Deathloop does a great job of allowing you to explore through the notes quickly. Visionaries can be sorted and points of interest in areas can be sorted by the time of day. While you can have objective markers on to get around, I recommend turning them off. Unlike plenty of developers that fall guilty to it, Arkane levels are designed in a way that you can get by without them. There were a few cases here and there where I would need to turn them on to get some direction, but otherwise the game is best played without them. So there are multiple ways that you could kill certain visionaries at certain times of day. For example, Rambling Frank could be killed in the morning, but he could also be killed in the evening with some fireworks. However, if there's one area where I feel is Deathloop's biggest missed opportunity, it's the fact that there's just one set way of taking down all the visionaries in one loop.
I think I've got this. Harriet at Carl's Bay in the morning. Sabotage Frank's fireworks while I'm there. Then off to the complex to take care of Igor's experiment. In the afternoon, I pay the lovebirds a visit at their nest. Then crash the party and pay my respects to Igor, Wenji, and Alexis.
Coming into Deathloop, I was expecting to have a few options on that front. I was really hoping for there to be a way to get all the visionaries to attend the party in the evening in Updawn. Now, the Visionaries know that they need to keep separate from one another to make things more difficult for Colt. However, I will love to see different possibilities, and if there was a way, if you were thorough enough to get a bunch of Visionaries in one area in one time frame. Instead, in order to get the perfect loop of killing them all, there's only one that's set in stone. Don't get me wrong, it's a lot of fun to go through a number of loops to piece everything together and have all the pieces fall into place of being able to do so. But for a studio that's so well known for player choice, it is a letdown to see that there weren't multiple options of completing a loop where all Visionaries were killed. Of course, this would require a lot more planning and variables, but also due to the fact that time doesn't pass in areas, we have 4 distinct time frames, I don't think it would have been out of the picture. As I mentioned earlier about the invasions, was this something they cut back on in order to give more focus to invasions? If I had the choice of having more options of killing all Visionaries in a single loop or keeping in invasions, I think I would go with more options. Now we're going to get into major spoiler territory for Deathloop, so this is your warning. I will also be having some slight spoilers for the movie Groundhog Day and the game Planescape Torment. As always, Arkane does a fantastic job of world building. I do appreciate how Deathloop has a smaller cast of characters for us to follow compared to, say, Prey or Dishonored. All the 8 Visionaries have distinct personalities with their own quirks and what they bring to the table. Some get more time to shine, while others feel a bit undercooked. For example, I enjoyed really getting to know Charlie and Fia and their secret relationship with one another.
On a trip. On a long holiday. Down. 'Cause you're high. I want to be there.
Getting them together and flooding them did really crack me up and felt really satisfying. In a missed opportunity, I would have liked to see some of these relationships more fleshed out amongst the Visionaries. We do get bits and pieces amongst notes in their group chats, but I would have loved to see more face-to-face amongst them, and that would have been great to give us more options to taking them down. Rambling Frank was another highlight for the Visionaries, and I think it's also due to a large part of how the voice actor seems to be doing his best Tom Waits impression.
You know what? I'm just not feeling it today. I think I'm just gonna do the old hits.
Well, it was a choice between entertainment and a career in air conditioning and refrigeration.
And Alexis Dorsey is such an over-the-top douchebag that I couldn't help but laugh at.
I'll tell you how. I'll fucking lay it out. It's all about attitude. Swagger. I walk into a room with just one thing. I let everyone know I own you. You answer to me.
He really has that tech founder aspect of him, and with the last name of Dorsey, I can't help but feeling this is influenced by Twitter founder and douchebag Jack Dorsey. But then there's characters like Harriet, the spiritual guru of the Visionaries, who only appears in the morning, and that's that. No other time, no other way of getting her to go to the party, or other time to take her down. It just seemed like when I first started that they were going to build up to finding a way of getting everyone to go to the party. But in the end, only 3 of the 8 Visionaries will go. Well, 4 with Frank, but he blows himself up with the fireworks. One area where Deathloop really falters, it's the overuse of quipping. Having Colt and Juliana constantly quip at each other like a Marvel film really feels out of place and gets really annoying.
Hi, Colt. What's up?
Huh? I just killed you.
You did, technically, but you also didn't. It's kind of hard to explain without complex diagrams.
How many versions of you are there?
Versions, not really the right term. Don't worry. There's one me that you need to kill, but there's also other me's that will try to kill you. See?
So you're hiding from me now.
Never. I'm always here. You just can't remember where to look.
Thankfully, their conversations do get better later in the game. This is due to some plot revelations popping up and things get a bit more serious between the two. But good lord is it annoying. I think we really need to set a mandate that unless you're a Marvel film, knock it off with the quipping. They should have been watching old James Bond films for inspiration or things from the 60s instead. And sadly, seeing what we've seen so far of Redfall from Arkane, it looks like the Marvel quipping isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
Sure thing, Edgar Allan Bro.
That's a good one.
Another issue is that Colt won't shut up in a lot of cases. This is another major issue with a lot of modern games. An overly chatty main character to help guide the player, and Deathloop falls guilty of it as well. Colt, I don't need you to verbally tell me each time that you can't carry any more ammo.
Already got full ammo.
If you cut at least half the dialogue between Juliana and Colt, the game would have been far better for it. Because there are some good and there are some funny moments here and there.
Otto is one and a prize and fucker ain't he.
And the voice acting is really well done all across the board. There are some missed opportunities here with the plot in regards to the looping and Colt growing as a character. Yes, he wants to end the loop and has his focus on killing the Visionaries to do so, and that's fine as the main goal. but there are some things about Colt that I thought that we could have explored a bit more into. For example, with the film Groundhog Day, Bill Murray's character eventually uses the loops to become a better, kinder person. And in one ending of Deathloop, this does happen in regards to his relationship with Juliana. And while not exactly a time loop story, Planescape Torment has various incarnations of the Nameless One looking to end the cycle that he's been trapped in, and how he grows and makes up for the mistakes of his past incarnations. There are various moments within Deathloop where we get to see different timelines and incarnations of Colt, all with different appearances and states of mind. These are some of the moments in the game that I was the most invested in, and I would love to see more of them.
You, me, we cool? Haven't shot you yet. Not this time. Maybe. So, how'd you get in here? Door was open. Used to be me, sneaking a girl down. Used to be I was the romantic. I think. Shit changes. Nah, man, just looks different. Fuck, shit, fucking work, you shit-cock motherfucker! Hey! Whoa, what the fuck, man? Piece of shit won't start!
But learning about the island itself, how the time loop works, Colt's role in all this, the revelation that Juliana is his daughter, and why she doesn't want to break the loop, it's all well done and intriguing. There's a lot that the game will hammer in to make sure we understand it, but there's still plenty of hidden and optional content that the game doesn't really draw attention to. One example being the side quest of coming across someone else besides Juliana and Colt who remembers from loop to loop. The game doesn't draw much attention to it, and doesn't draw much attention to it afterwards. Perhaps something that will be explored more in a DLC, or just something to throw in there to add some mystery. Another fun side quest is trying to get all 10 questions right about the history of Blackrock. You have to go out there and pay attention and collect notes in order to do so. Now, the game does draw attention to some of these notes with the more you know in all caps, but you still have to go through your notes again on that front. Arkane has always been great with this kind of area. They put so much detail into stuff that only a tiny fraction of players will come across, but it's greatly appreciated. This of course builds up to that final loop of piecing things together where the stakes are at its highest. I had a botched assassination attempt on Dorsey, which resulted in me more or less needing to clear out the place, and losing a couple lives along the way. This tension of trying to end this loop, knowing that another death will send me all the way back to the beginning, including heightened enemies, even if still fairly dumb, was some really great stuff. And then there's the ending itself of meeting Juliana. Plus, if it wasn't obvious before in some of the things that you come across in the game, this is set in the Dishonored universe.
Dueling pistols, vintage pieces, original oil cartridges, completely unique.
Kinda dusty.
They're museum pieces, part of history, worth preserving.
I'll provide a link to some Reddit threads that you could look at, but yeah, these pistols are straight from the Dishonored world. Slabs are also obvious with the powers, and some of the stuff that Harriet mentions in her sermon gives allusions to it. There was also a leaked slide that people found that draws the connection between the two. So whether this slide is quote-unquote canon as its older document and Colt has a different name, it's left to be seen. And in one of the endings of ending the loop, we wake up on the beach to a different looking world, which leads to a really interesting point. How long were we in the loop for? If you look at those leaked slides, it's the year 2254. Sure, it's a bit of a downer ending, but it's not like the game was unlikely to go for that direction. There's many allusions to it, and Wenji mentions that the loop can maintain itself for about 13,000 years, even though she plans to end it at 50. But since that memory doesn't stick around for her, who really knows? I like to think it's up for the player to determine. One of the more interesting things about Groundhog Day is it's never outright clear how long he was stuck in the same day. Some theories range from years to decades to a number of centuries, so I like to think the same case of what's going on here. So overall, Deathloop is an interesting mix of what came before from Arkane, trying things that they wanted to do well over 15 years ago with Invasions, even if it didn't quite hit the mark with what it all goes for. However, it's still a great game with all its flaws. I do wish it committed more to some of these design decisions because it felt like in some ways they really held back. And I do give it credit for being a polarizing game. Some will love it, some will hate it. I wouldn't be surprised if we get some DLC to flesh out the game before. Arkane has an excellent track record in regards to their DLC, so I wouldn't be surprised if they play a large factor in improving the game. As it currently stands, I do recommend Deathloop if you're a fan of Arkane's work, or also if you're a fan of games with the immersive sim design philosophy. However, if you're still hesitant, waiting a few months for sales or additional DLC may be the right choice. I'm currently not sure of its sales numbers. Steam player count hasn't been overly high, and this is also a timed PS5 exclusive, so we'll have to wait and see. Besides the first Dishonored, Arkane titles have never been huge sellers. And while there was more of a marketing push with Deathloop, it still didn't feel like it was a great way of explaining what the game was all about. As far as the future of Arkane, I'm not really sure what to expect. They're now under the Microsoft umbrella. Redfall was unveiled earlier this year and, well, I haven't exactly been thrilled with what I've seen, and the same case goes for many others. While it's not 100% clear how it will play yet, leaks make it sound like a looter shooter. Ugh. Sure, it will have the Arkane spin to it, but Arkane throughout the years have been pretty good at sticking to their own thing instead of following trends. To have them what appears to be jumping on the looter-shooter bandwagon is pretty disappointing. It doesn't help that the trailer is full of quipping. That said, we haven't seen any official gameplay, but from what leaks are showing so far, I don't have tons of enthusiasm for it. Rafael Colantonio, the founder of Arkane who left in 2017, shortly after the release of Prey, started a new company, Wolfeye Studios. They should be launching their first title, Weird West, in the next few months. This makes use of the isometric perspective with a Wild West setting, and something that you should be keeping an eye on if you're a fan of this style of game. While they've had a number of setbacks and cancelled projects over the years, Arkane Studios keeps trucking away. They were founded in the fall of 1999, which is an incredibly long time. Even more so when you consider how short-lived other studios were when they made use of the immersive sim design philosophy. They struggled to make it by in their earlier years before being acquired by Bethesda, and now that's even less of an issue under the Microsoft umbrella. With the exception of the first Dishonored, which was a massive sales success, Arkane titles have never been huge sellers but have devoted fan bases with long shelf lives. Deathloop in a way feels like an end of an era for Arkane, the era that began with Dishonored and ending with Deathloop, a mixture of everything they had done up to that point, from aspects of Prey Mooncrash and elements of their unreleased game The Crossing. Now we're in the Microsoft era of Arkane. Redfall is set to release in the summer of 2022 and has been in development for a number of years. What lies beyond that for Arkane? Who knows? While I had mentioned in the past that the future of these kind of games with the immersive sim design school of thought are likely going to be coming from the indie space, I do hope that we get to see more from larger studios. There are some here and there on the horizon, not much beyond from Arkane, who have been the constant on that front for a number of years. So here's to hoping that Arkane has some other projects in the wings that still forge their own identity, especially compared to Redfall, which looks more like a design by committee than original work. And that's something I can respect about Deathloop. While it does have some execution issues that fall short of its premise, and while it felt like it was a bit safe in regards to committing to its design decisions, it's still distinctly an Arkane title. In an industry full of sequel upon sequel, remakes, remasters, reboots, it's nice to have something that doesn't fall under that category. While it doesn't hit the highs of Prey or Dishonored and lacks some of the charm of the older works like Dark Messiah or Arx Fatalis, I'd still take it over a vast majority of what the AAA space puts out these days, especially from Western developers.
I need orange juice. I need some red, blue, yellow. I need paint. Please. I'm running dry.